So this is the second webinar that we are organizing with the Environment Agency. Our Bright Future is organizing with the Environment Agency. And the session is focusing on what you said on the first webinar, that you really wanted to have more information on the careers with the Environment Agency. And then the second bit, we will focus on water, the challenges and choices consultation on water. So I will do an introduction to our Bright Future and the 3 asks. Then Jane will talk about careers with the Environment Agency. Then we'll hear from Joanna about how working with the Environment Agency is. And then we will have some time for your questions, like for you to ask some questions about careers. Then we'll move to the second part that is about the challenges and choices, like a link with water consumption management. And Tony will go through these 3 questions with you. And then Jenny will and then like your responses will be collated and will form like the response to the consultation. Then Jenny will show like the interactive infographics and will collect some feedback from you. We'll share these interactive infographics in the email, in the invitation to the webinar. And then the final point is like wrapping up with next steps and also like what is going to happen after the webinar. Okay. So without further ado, I hand over to Jane. Oh no, sorry, there is my bit. Sorry, about our Bright Future. So our Bright Future. So our Bright Future is an ambitious, innovative partnership that is led by the Wildlife Trust and funded by the National Lottery Community Fund. It's formed by 31 projects, each delivering with a focus on young people and the environment across the UK. Each project is helping young people to gain vital skills and experience, and young people act as a catalyst for delivering change at the local level for the local environment and communities. So what we have achieved so far, we engaged with more than 100,000 young people. We created or improved more than 2,800 green spaces. Young people gained more than 6,000 qualifications, and more than 400 young people get into full-time employment. The most exciting experience for me was to create with the young people and the youth workers involved in the program 3 asks that we are now trying to promote widely. The first task is learning in and about nature. And today we submitted a letter to the Education Select Committee to ask for an inquiry into the value of outdoor learning for children and young people to spend more time outdoors in nature. The second ask is for young people to have better chances, better opportunities to get a career into the environmental sector. And I'm part of a group within Wildlife and Countryside Link, trying to ask the government for long-term funding to go into into this initiative, what we have called National Nature Service. So check it out online, more actions that we are currently planning for these. And the third point is for young people to get a better voice, so to get the chance to express themselves, to hear from agencies like the Environment Agency, and to express their voices, to get around the table when decisions are taken. So this last point is linked with the webinar today. So today you will hear from the Environment Agency and you will get an opportunity to express your points. So now, without further ado, I hand over to Jane.
Thank you, Roberta. So, hello everyone, I'm Jane Roomry and I work with the Environment Agency, and my job title is the Education to Profession Advisor. What that means in practice is that I help to plan and coordinate our engagement with children and young people in the flood and coastal risk management section of the business. The Environment Agency is a very big organisation. We're what's called an arm's length public body, and we're part of DEFRA. So we're part of the wider DEFRA family, and that's the Department for Environment, Food and Rural Affairs. So the big question before we talk about what careers are available is, what do we actually do as the Environment Agency? Now, our headline is that we protect and improve the environment, and all the decisions we make are to reduce the impacts of climate change on people and wildlife, and that really is at the heart of everything we do. We've recently released our plan of how we're going to work between now and the year 2025, so that's our 5-year plan, and we've got 3 key things we're looking at there. And what we want to achieve is having a nation that's resilient to the impacts of climate change. We want to have healthy air, land and water, and I know later Tony and Jenny are going to talk to you about how we can help to achieve that. And we want to promote green growth and a sustainable future for everybody. So across the organisation, we've got 4 main areas that I'm going to talk about. The first one is we do lots of work to reduce the risk of flooding, and I think in recent years there's been more and more flooding's appeared more and more in the media, and it seems to be something that's happening more often. Our role is to help reduce the risk of this from rivers and reservoirs and estuaries in the sea. And we want to protect people and places, so people and their houses and businesses from the impacts of flooding. We work with local councils and water companies to do this, and we've got a flood warning system and we're working to expand that. And we also work with the emergency services during floods. Another key aspect is there's lots of science and research going on, identifying how we can reduce the risk of flooding and how we can plan the best ways for reducing that risk in the future as well. So at the moment, we've got over 8,000 kilometres of flood defences across England, and that would stretch from London to Dakar. If you're not sure where that is, have a look on Google Maps afterwards and you'll see it's an extremely long distance. We've got massive amount of flood defences across England, and the picture you can see, I don't know if you can see my pointer here, is of the Thames Barrier. Another thing we do is we work to protect the environment. So this is about our role to regulate industry, and we regulate environmental pollution to try and protect wildlife and habitats, and that's so that we can all enjoy the outdoors. The outdoors really is for everyone, and we want to promote that use, and that's not going to happen if areas are polluted. So we work with people to help them meet their legal responsibilities, and we do prosecute people if we find that they're willfully breaking the law. So we're working with them to stop that happening, but if it does happen and it's because of their own willfully damaging the environment, we will prosecute. We regulate waste, so we regulate where your rubbish goes or waste disposal sites, and we license removal of water from rivers. So water companies do, for instance, do abstract water from rivers, and we license that. And we also set enforcement standards across air, land and water. And last year, the illegal waste economy, it's actually a massive crime industry. It cost the UK economy 1 billion last year. Another thing we do is we help to improve the environment. So we're protecting it, but we're also trying to improve it. So we go out and we measure pollution levels, and where necessary, we'll take action to try and improve those. So if we see that there's poor quality of air, land or water, we'll work to improve that. We work with conservation organisations such as Natural England, or another organisation within the DEFRA group that we work with. We license fisheries, so if you're out angling, you'll need a fishing licence to go angling on rivers. And we license boating, so if you're boating on the Thames or in another river, we might be the people that provide a licence for that. At the moment, in the UK, 70% of our rivers and lakes are at risk from invasive species, and that's linked to climate change because we have a movement of species and they can adapt better as temperatures rise and conditions change. And the damage that they cause can cost up to 1.7 billion a year. So the work we're doing really does have impacts on the economy all round. The last thing that I'm going to talk about that we do, and I haven't covered everything because it's vast, is responding to emergencies. So we deal with incidents that affect the natural environment, and we work really closely with other organisations dealing with buildings and roads and the water supply to keep neighbourhoods safe and clean. We would deal with incidences of fish kills or if fish are diseased or distressed. We look at blockages that block rivers and canals and can lead to flooding. We'd look at unusual drops in river levels, illegal waste dumping, and problems with hazardous sites or sort of chemical fires. So that's part of the incidents that we respond to. Right now, there's 5.3 million properties in England that are at risk of flooding. So we're doing all we can to try and mitigate that risk so that those emergencies won't happen. So if we go to the next slide, I can tell you about some of the jobs that are available in these areas to help us to achieve our aims, really. A key area that we support is engineering in the Environment Agency. We've got lots of career entry level points for engineering, particularly civil engineering. Now, if you want to become a civil engineer, usually your route would be through university and you would have to have some kind of maths in your background. And we have a structured training scheme that leads to chartership, which is important if you want to be an engineer. There's also, if you did decide to go to university, we have scholarships that we offer and we have internships and placements that we offer. So civil engineering really is looking at designing and building our assets, and by our assets we mean, for instance, our flood defences, and also planning and designing the projects and site supervision. So it's a very, very broad remit if you wanted to look at civil engineering. Another way into that would be through our flood and coastal engineering degree programme that starts at foundation level at Brunel. So there's lots of different routes in, and we're currently looking at ways we could offer an apprenticeship route through that, but that's not quite ready to go yet. Another aspect of engineering is what we in the Environment Agency refer to as MICA engineering, but what that means is mechanical and electrical engineering. So it's slightly different to the civil engineering approach. And we do have some people that are being funded through their degrees and other people that are coming once they've finished their degree and join our graduate training scheme. We've got environmental officers. We actually have a scheme where you can enter the Environment Agency as an environmental officer at what we call entry level. So that would be after leaving school or university. So this is an entry point after A level. What an environment officer does is they work with businesses, both large and small businesses, to make sure that they're working within environmental regulations, make sure that they're obeying the environmental laws, basically. And that includes places like landfill sites and others, factories and others like that. We've got a whole area called fisheries, biodiversity and geomorphology teams. Now this is really broad and there's no way to cover the full breadth of the type of jobs we've got available. But if you have any interest in any science, so biology, chemistry, physics, geology, there's probably a role for you in the Environment Agency. Now, we've just released an environmental practitioner degree that's an apprenticeship degree, which is a level 6, so that's a degree level 1. And entry into that will take you across the organisation and you get to learn as you work. So it's really exciting. Most of our specialists, as we refer to them, would be degree level or above, but that doesn't mean that you can't find other routes in. Apprenticeships. We have got quite a few apprenticeship nowadays, actually. We've got our level 3 water and environment worker. Now that would be one that you could potentially enter post GCSE or post A level, post level 3. There you are working out in the field more often, so you'll be looking after our assets, making sure that rivers are clear, you know, removing trees that are blocking rivers and that kind of thing. There's lots and lots of apprenticeships we offer internally as well, and we're hugely diverse. We've got facilities management, so that's the people that look after our offices. We've got administration, we've got policy officers, data analysts. Our opportunities really are diverse. But to get into the Environment Agency, our apprenticeships aren't always advertised as apprenticeships. And I think if you're looking currently, it's always worth going to our jobs website and really carefully reading the jobs that are advertised, because quite often they'll be advertised as a normal job with training attached, and that training will be an apprenticeship. Or if you come in on an entry-level job, there are lots and lots of opportunities once you're in to then undertake that apprenticeship. So we're still working, we're still growing ourselves to be able to attract young people into the business at entry level, but we're doing our best, and we have grown quite a lot in the last few years. I'm going to stop there and hand over to Joanna, who's going to talk to you about her role and her work in the Environment Agency.
So just a moment.
So hello, I'm Jo Heiss. I'm a biodiversity technical specialist at the Environment Agency, and I also lead our women's network. As a biodiversity technical specialist, my role is to ensure that the activities that we do and we undertake and regulate won't harm wildlife, but that will also enhance the environment for wildlife. And as lead for the women's network, my role is to bring together a network of volunteers in the Environment Agency to look to encourage, enable and equip women to achieve their full potential in the workplace. So both roles are really different, but both extremely rewarding. In terms of why the water environment is important, for me it's really three key points. One, rivers and wetlands are absolutely vital habitats in their own right. Many of our rare and endangered species absolutely rely on having healthy rivers to thrive and survive. But rivers are also really important corridors for wildlife through our landscapes and our towns and our cities. And without having healthy rivers, wildlife won't thrive across our countryside as a whole. And finally, for me, one of the most important points about the water environment is that it provides us with so many fantastic services. The river environment and natural rivers provide us with food, with shelter, with protection from flooding. They help regulate our climate, they filter the water and recycle nutrients, but they also provide us with fantastic recreational opportunities such as boating or angling, walking, bird watching, and really we all benefit from having a fantastic water environment around us. Going forward and looking at our local choices and what we need to do to continue improving our water environment, I really feel that we need to look at creating more space for water, but obviously that's not as easy as it sounds. And in some places, the water environment is extremely constrained. And that's why I really love doing this job, because that's where we look at looking for doing creative and innovative solutions to improving the water environment. And what I've loved about my career so far are the really successful projects I've been able to work on, bringing together teams of different specialisms, such as engineering with ecology, such as myself, fisheries, landscape architecture, and many other specialisms who've been able to come together and work on projects which have brought together those specialisms in a really fantastic way to come up with innovative solutions to improve our water environment. And examples of those would be projects where we've broken rivers out of concrete channels in urban parks, and conversely at the other end of the scale, projects where we've looked at natural flood management, which is bringing back features to slow the water down in the right places in a river catchment, creating new habitats as well. And there's been places, especially in urban environments, where it looks as though the rivers are completely a bit of a lost cause, where you can't really do anything, but we've been able to come together and bolt on habitat features onto river walls or concrete features, and being able to see wildlife come in and use that, and also know that we've achieved other objectives such as protecting local communities from flooding has been extremely satisfying. And that's part of the reason why I do this job, really. I wanted to work in nature conservation, and the Environment Agency has enabled me to use my knowledge that I gained through my degree in biology and my master's in nature conservation to really apply that in a pragmatic and practical way on the ground. Throughout my career, and I've been at the Environment Agency for 16 years now, mostly working in nature conservation and biodiversity, I've been able to constantly learn, and I've been able to push myself to learn through what I've done. I've applied my knowledge in a really practical way, as I've already said, and more importantly, I've been able to work with others, and that's become even more important at the moment as I lead the Women's Network, and I'm helping and enabling others to achieve their full potential in their careers. So for me, it's been a really satisfying job to do.
Okay, So now it's the time to go to the Q&A session. So I will share again the presentation and we can start with the Q&A. Just a moment. Okay.
So we've had a couple of questions in the chat.
Okay.
So we've got a general question about being involved with the Environment Agency and how to get employment in the sector, which I think hopefully you've covered. And then another question about the Kickstart scheme. So is the Environment Agency being involved in the Kickstart scheme?
Yeah, I don't mind taking this one. Just, can anyone else hear echo on the line?
I could. It's stopped now.
Oh, good. Okay. We're not currently involved in the Kickstart scheme. In the organisation, we have only reinvigorated our engagement with young people in the last 18 months. So we're building all the time, but the Kickstart scheme is something I'm going to take back to my wider team, who are the workforce and skills team, and see if it's something we can start to support and become involved in. And becoming involved with the Environment Agency, there's lots of things you can do. We are working with Nuffield on work experience for 16 to 18-year-olds, but also you can contact what we call the National Customer Coordination Centre, NCCC. We'll send on the email address, and they're a place that you can email to ask if there's work experience available in your local area, and they will ask you for your interests and that type of thing. And that's how we do it at the moment, but we're hoping to move to something a lot more structured in the future.
Any other questions, feel free to wave your hands or pop them in the chat. So are there opportunities, so one of the people on the webinar is kind of in the West Midlands region, are there opportunities throughout the UK?
Yeah, we've got offices across England, so you name a county, we've got an office there. I think that would be safe to say, and we have multiple offices in most areas, so there will be an office or a site fairly near to you. And certainly West Midlands and Coventry area, they're quite active and are quite actually active in their engagement with children and young people, so they might be a really good one to get in touch with. Okay, so the job roles that are mainly practical rather than office-based, I mentioned our level 3 water environment worker apprenticeship that is actually the first cohort were employed last year. That would be what we call a field-based job, and that is mainly practical rather than an office-based job. If you want to get into something that is above level 3, if you're planning on going to university and doing a degree, lots of our jobs do involve going out in the field. So we have, I mean, Joanna, unfortunately she's not on the call, but she would be able to tell you about how you can get out in the field. But we do go out and do a lot of sampling. Our specialists do that. We have a whole team that go out and monitor the health and biodiversity of different areas. So there's many jobs in biodiversity, hydrology, geology, geomorphology, which are very long words, but they're all related to science and geography, where you can get out in the field. yes, I will make a PDF available to be sent on to everyone with some links to useful areas and some email addresses that might be useful to you.
And we sent in like some more information last time, so we can circulate again the information we sent after the first webinar with more like information on different careers. But yeah, good.
There's lots of information as well, and I think Tony's going to share some of the links to on Learn Live. We've done a few. There's some recorded sessions on the Learn Live website that talks about different careers in the Environment Agency and actually across the sector. So we've got lots of partners we work with in the environment sector. So that might be something worth looking at, and we can send those links on to.
And it was a really good tip to keep an eye on your website, because like some entry-level jobs are hidden there as well. Like that was found it particularly interesting. I didn't know.
Yeah, we're still working through what apprenticeships are offered as straight apprenticeships, so on the apprenticeship website, and what we advertise just on our website, but actually are offering an apprenticeship for the person who's employed.
Yeah. Good. Have you got any more questions? Okay. I think that we could then go into the second part of the webinar if there are not any more questions. Yeah. Okay. So I will. Oh, how did you get started in the role you are in? For all of you. How you all started.
I can speak about my experience if that's useful.
Yes.
So I've got an undergraduate degree in geography and natural hazards. I worked at Coventry University actually before I joined the Environment Agency in their Environment and Sustainability department, working on mainly the ISO 14001 environmental management system, getting that up and running. Also did some project and program management and some auditing across the various campuses. I then applied for a job at the Environment Agency, and I moved into an operational role within the National Enforcement Service. So that was mainly waste enforcement. I did that for about 18 months and then decided that I'd like to move back into sort of project and program management, and have worked in a variety of programs since over the last 3 to 4 years. That's my background.
Thank you, Jenny. What about you, Jane?
Well, I'll go back to the beginning because I think it's relevant to people on the line. When I started my post-school career, I went and did an MVQ level 3 and worked in the operating theatres of a hospital for a few years. Then I changed my mind. So at 21, I went to university and studied marine biology. Didn't know what to do afterwards, so I managed to find a funded master's programme in environmental engineering, so I did that, and following that I went on and did a PhD in Ireland in marine ecology. So I started out on the vocational route and ended up doing a PhD a number of years later. I came into the Environment Agency after that as a marine technical specialist, so I was giving advice about whether or not you can build in certain areas of the estuarine and coastal environment. Then I had my daughter and decided to go and teach science in a secondary school for a couple of years. And fun as that was, my heart was back in the Environment Agency, so I came back into the Environment Agency having had some experience in education into this role as an education to profession advisor. The reason I told you that whole history is to let you know there's lots and lots of different ways to get to the same point. So just because you go one way to start with doesn't mean you have to end there later on.
Perfect. Thank you, Jane. And finally, Tony.
I've had a similar checkered history. I did a degree in biology, and then had various roles. I worked in a lab at a yogurt factory, worked in Jamaica in a marine lab, but couldn't really get paid to do that. And so a lot of the roles I looked for, I couldn't get past interview because I didn't really have experience. So I ended up as well doing a funded master's in pollution and environment. And there I did my project with the Environment Agency looking at pollution onto beaches. So that got me in a month's contract, and that was quite a long time ago. So I worked, looking at pollution onto beaches. Then I moved across and actually worked with Joe, who you saw earlier in London, working in the biodiversity team. And then I moved into policy and worked on marine bills and various then roles on a European project. So I got to go around Europe looking how they were restoring their rivers and bringing back some of the knowledge over to the UK. And now looking at our future of water and what we want to do. But there's nothing to stop you from moving around the Environment Agency, which is quite nice. I started in West Wales, and I'm now on the South Coast via London and various other offices that we've got.
Perfect. Thank you so much for sharing your personal experience of like how your work and life started with Environment Agency. So one question, when I share the presentation, shall I stay in? Can you see each other? Because I cannot see you while I'm in the presentation. Do you see each other?
You see the person who's speaking.
Okay, no problem then. I will, now I will go back into the presentation. It's you, Tony, talking about like asking the 3 questions. So just a moment.
So yes. Ooh, back again. I'll try again. See if we're getting back again.
Yes.
I'll go on and off mute, but it wasn't. Is that any better? It's actually Roberta. Might be why.
I click on mute, so I'm on mute.
Okay, at the moment you're appearing in the corner of the talk, and I've got a lot of recall, which we didn't have 2 seconds ago.
Seems to have disappeared now, Tony.
Cool. Okay, I will go for it while we're ahead. So we've got 3 questions that we would love to run past you and hear your thoughts on this and have a bit of a discussion. And the reason we're doing that is that we've got a consultation out at the moment called Challenges and Choices. And as part of that, it explains why water is a vital resource, and what we would like to hear is your thoughts on the action that needs to be taken. We don't want to make these decisions just within the public sector, within our own organisation. So the consultation describes the challenges that threaten the water environment and explores how we can work together to manage our waters, and also looks at who should pay for the actions needed. But bigger challenges need bigger and bolder solutions, and as part of that, we'll only find them by talking to others and working this out together. And that's why we want to hear your ideas for action that needs to be taken on the pressures we're facing, and what you would like the environment to look like in the future. We've also developed some interactive slides, which Jenny will show you later, and that we're on the link to this discussion. And that provides some information on the water environment and would help to inform your views on the questions that we're going to be discussing. But just as some backgrounds to the consultation. So in England, we've got majestic rivers, we've got crystal clear streams, we've got wide estuaries, we've got dazzling lakes, and we've got within our natural water systems, they provide us many, many benefits. So water's precious, water's essential. But most people, when they think about water, it's when it's not behaving as we want to. So maybe flooding through your front door or your kitchen tap running dry, that might galvanise some attention. A dried up stream or a polluted river might ring alarm bells. And perhaps at the coast, when people do see sewage outlets and that sort of thing impacting on the water. But generally, in terms of national concerns, it's not always there as an issue for the general public. However, we think with the COVID-19 pandemic, it's shown how the environment and the way we live in our lives are explicitly linked together, which is what you recognise when you work in water, or you're visiting water, or interacting with water. And we're now seeing how environmental exploitation can have devastating impacts on our economy and our way of life through COVID. Imagine multiple COVID-like crises going into the long term in the future. So the impact of biodiversity and climate emergencies make this more and more plausible, and represents what you might look at as a perfect storm, which could devastate our way of life unless we act and think about actions that we need to do. So we have made significant progress in the quality of the water, and so the water itself, over the past decades, and we have used robust regulatory frameworks put in place. But wider environmental improvements, what we're finding through our evidence, have been stalling. So positive action and progress is being made, but there's been no significant improvement in this overall ecology of England's water in the recent past. So human pressure and demands on the water environment is now making it harder and harder for us to deliver those improvements. The climate is more unpredictable and extreme, along with increased water demands, makes it even harder to improve our water. We've got burgeoning population, which is expected to grow by another 6 million people by 2043, resulting in greater need for homes, workplaces, transport, energy, water, placing increasing strain on our natural world. So we've got a long history in the UK of land use change, mostly converting land to agriculture, but this has a significant impact on the water environment. So in the UK, we've lost 90% of our wetland habitats in the last 100 years, and now 2/3 of existing species are in decline. Water demand is increasing, and it's expected that in about 25 years' time, unless we take action in parts of England, we won't have enough water to supply our basic needs. The water that we use to support our needs is taken from rivers and from groundwater. And if we want to take more from our beautiful rivers, streams, lakes, or perhaps even estuaries, this will start to deteriorate their quality. Our waters won't longer be places for wildlife to flourish, or for us to use and us to enjoy. The water environment is under pressure, and we do need to do some action. A lot has been achieved to improve England's water environments, but we're getting to the end of effectiveness of our current methods. We have to think and act now to organise how water and the water environment are managed and distributed in the future. Who should have it? What should it be used for? And how do we decide this? We need some fresh thinking and new attitudes to this precious resource, which brings me to the first question. So, do you agree with the big idea of restoring rivers, wetlands and coasts to a more natural state? So, trying to return the rivers and other waterways, floodplains, wetlands as near as possible to that natural state before humans had changed pollution to divert them. So, why did we do that? And why might we do that? Is we would like to support rivers to better adapt to climate change, which is what I was mentioning, that it's under pressure before. to support wildlife, to enable recreation and to reduce flood risk. I'm just going to show you a couple of slides from the interactive slides which help answer some of this question. We'll come back to this question, but this is the bigger question, so I thought I would give some of the slides to really help your thinking. So if we go to the next one. Within those slides, you can take a look at some of the problems. So as we build more homes, we've made mistakes. Some 300,000 houses in the UK are badly connected to our water systems. So as part of that, discharges from bathrooms, appliances go straight into rainwater sewers and into our beaches and rivers, rather than connecting to the soil pipe and taken to a sewage treatment work. So that's quite a lot of misconnections there. Also, even with modern waste treatment systems, at times the treatment sewers are overloaded by heavy rainfall or blockages such as fatbergs, which is oil and fats and disposable wipes all getting together into these huge fatbergs, which I don't know if you've seen mentioned in the press. Also, younger people in particular leaving rural areas and coastal towns for urban areas through England. So connecting innovation, idea sharing, accessing the economy. But this growth in city population also has an enormous impact on housing and waste. So, you know, what changes would you like? You look in the middle of the River Thames that Jane was showing a picture of earlier. If that was in its natural state, it would be 3 times larger. I'm not sure we're quite going to knock down the Houses of Parliament and go back to Roman times in where that river would flow. But some of these are things that we need to think about. Where do we get back some of the natural habitat into these rivers? What is the balance that we want between the needs we have from water and where it will still flourish and support wildlife? So also on the slides, if you go to the next slide, you can find out a little bit about what we control and manage at the moment. So we do permits and balance the amount of water taken by businesses, industry, and sort of by the water industry for yourselves, for your own households. The next slide. You can find out about how population growth puts pressure onto the water environment. And the last slide. And yeah, again, there's all sorts of things that you can find out about how it's affecting and future changes through climate change. So, Roberta, could we skip back to the question slide again, which was, do you agree with the big idea of restoring rivers, wetlands and coasts to a more natural state? And I can see the chat's been going, but I have not looked at it at all. So let's have a conversation. Hi. Roberta, was somebody having a look at the chat? Sorry.
Yeah, do you want me to go through?
Yes, please, Kath. Yeah. So
Sorry, it's quite a long chat, so I'm just trying to read it before I read it out.
Quite a long point that Umar made.
So trying to restore the water to its natural state and as it was meant to be, and I agree, having special areas for leisure and areas for fishing and angling and boating and other activities, and having sewers diverted to where it's meant to go, outdoor education for children and young people of all ages and backgrounds, and creating open opportunities and having more laws in place for business, and educating in people in communities where there is water nearby.
Yeah, I think those are great points. Is it okay if people want to add to some of this chat? Just thinking there's quite a lot of points there. And what we were saying, if we're doing responses to challenges and choices, what we could do is to take out some of those points and the important things that the water needs to be restored to do, we can pull those out to show what's important to you and what you think that should be there. And I've taken from your last point about more laws, yeah, having the laws or regulation in place to manage those using for their own businesses. Water is important to you.
And you can share it either on the chat, or like you can share it like by raising your hands and share it like with your voice, if you prefer that.
So yeah, should we give more space for rivers and coasts to move and adjust naturally to regenerate habitat? Should we move houses and buildings to make space on people's farms or in the park? How do we create balances between water needing for wildlife and for people, businesses, for agriculture?
It's a quite challenging balance.
It is.
Yeah, let's.
I think people are tapping away.
Yes. So let's wait a little bit for like the points to come through. Yes. We've got a little bit more time on these, and then we go to the second point, the second question. Lots of points from humor, really, like it cover all. Okay, Abby, 100% agree with restoring to a more natural state, but with population change, climate change, and advances in technology, natural might not be the same as it was in years gone by.
Yeah, I think that's a very good point. And I think in some, yeah, as I was saying, in some places, going right the way back and removing all of our cities isn't going to be possible. But that doesn't mean that it can't provide some of the support for nature. And where is that balance? What's, you know, in some parts of the country, they're reintroducing beavers as part of their natural. In other parts of the country, it's, you know, it's all about just having a river passing through your park, which supports local wildlife, nothing particularly rare, but having it look natural, having it providing the services rather than a concrete channel or it being covered up, or making sure it doesn't flood your home, but allowing it to flood parks or flood farmland. So I agree with you completely, and it's a difficult balance.
Oh, wow. Lots in the chat now.
Okay, so Lizzie's.
Yeah, so Lizzie, it's hard to know what the balance is, if it is possible to restore rivers back, as like you said about the Thames would naturally be a lot bigger. But in areas where it is possible, I think it's really important to do so to help with the changes of climate change and to help increase the biodiversity.
Yeah, Lizzie, thanks for that point. Yeah, the tricky thing is sometimes there's different land use. Some areas where we're farming for food, for agriculture, so that could be livestock, or it could be grain, it could be for biofuel. There's various different uses that we do in our land use. How do we make the decisions on how much we perhaps in the future, when we're in control of it, we pay farmer to provide services, or in some areas it is about the food we want to make sure we source it locally, and it's not coming from other parts of the world, and we, in some senses, we export our pollution to those places where there's less regulation in some cases. So sometimes it's about thinking in that bigger picture. It's useful for us to know that you think that is important, and that that we should be looking where we can to return things naturally, and perhaps that's our starting point. But yeah, we do need much more focus on it if we're going to improve things, because of these additional pressures that I was saying.
Yeah. So there is another point from Umar. I would agree, moving houses maybe, but it's quite difficult and costly, and I think having more water through houses and farms and other urban areas and rural and other areas.
Yeah, yeah. We don't just want, I guess, our most natural, or all of our natural rivers just to be in sort of very remote places. We do want them through some of our cities and towns, or else people would have very little contact with nature. And in some places that might mean moving houses, but I guess to start with, we need to think about where we put our new houses in the first place, and that the water environment's a key decision maker as part of that. At the moment, you just have to balance your impact. So when your local authority decides on planning, what they'll look at is to mitigate and compensate some actions. But they have been putting in policies where they need to look to actually what's called a net gain, which is something that we very much support, that they actually look to improve the environment as part of infrastructure build or housing, and locate it in areas where there will be enough water for them to drink, or enough capacity to take their sewage, those sorts of aspects.
Okay, so I think that we need to move to the other question, but please keep typing in the chat, because all the ideas will be collated at the end and given to the Environment Agency. I'm sharing the video, my presentation again.
Great.
Okay, so shall we go to the other question?
Yeah. I think we're back to a bit of it seems to settle down. So this question, I'm still on. It's got a lot of reading. I'll try muting and unmuting again. Hi, is that better?
That's great.
Brilliant. That seems to be the solution. Mute yourself and unmute yourself again. Okay, so question 2 is, where should we focus our actions? We don't have bottomless pots, and yeah, so this question is about, do you think we should be improving all our water a bit, or should we be focusing on those heavily polluted rivers, or those, you know, completely encased in concrete that you can't see anymore? Or should our focus be keeping those rivers that are at the moment in the most natural state? I don't think we've got any that we've not tampered with a little bit. But yeah, protecting them from invasive species and other pressures, and making sure that we keep those pristine. Another tricky question, I'm afraid. But if we gave you the money, where would you spend it? Perhaps also, who should make that decision over where that money's spent? I've got something coming in.
So let's give a little bit of time to type, and yeah. It's quite a big questions.
We've not brought you small questions, but got high hopes.
High expectations, no pressure.
Well, they're real questions. They're very real questions.
Yeah.
Yep. Uma, thank you.
The humor, all water areas, and the areas are very populated. They should have high importance, and local people should be able to make the choices where the money is spent and how it's used and what for.
So localism, and as it were, local choices, and we particularly should look at places where areas are highly urban. I mean, when we do look at our evidence and look across the country, what always shocks me is that some of the poorer areas also have the poorer environments. They have the waste sites, they often have rivers which are more degraded. So not only, this sort of socially, they've got less jobs and those sides of things, you also find that they've got a worse quality environment. So that's which is often highly populated.
I can see a raised hand.
Hi. In terms of like, hi. In terms of like the populated areas, the areas that like really pollute, the like waterways and the rivers and various other things that are like already very polluted, I think addressing those first, so more of a higher priority. Trying to solve that and where that's like pollution's coming from and how it's got there in the first place and all that kind of thing. And then like, looking at, is it like linked to very populated areas or not, or is it like more in like rural kind of areas or more towards like factories or that kind of thing? So
there are a mixture of reasons of why these areas are polluted. Some are polluted for historic industry. A lot of it is the industry that has impacted on the water environment is historic. And that sort of certain nasty chemicals that might have been banned a long time ago are still within the sediments and within the system. Also, how we've designed some of the rivers for quite a few of those areas. We may well have overwinded them, we may have removed the habitat and concreted it, because the way we managed flood risk and managed our water was to try and move it away as fast as possible, particularly when there were high levels of sewage and those aspects, which a lot of that has been managed to reduce it. Now you still get quite a significant amount of pollution still coming from agriculture, from our land uses. So you get nutrients which have been put on the fields as part of farming for those reasons. An amount of that will come off. It's their leaky systems, as it were. And it's tricky to do that type of farming without that happening. We might also have certain land uses in the wrong place, and that's particular areas that you could address. There's also what I was mentioning, misconnection. So within urban areas, there could be misconnected whole houses or housing estates. And also we've got road runoff, which is not always treated. Not all of that goes to sewer. Some of that will go straight. It may have some interceptors, but all the tyre rubber coming off vehicles and all the various pollution that comes off from the roads is an impact that you will find sort of within urban areas. I've lost my steam there, I think, but there's quite a lot of different types of issues, and that's part of the problem that we have. We have looked at the straightforward end of pipe, as it's called, type of pollution, and now we have to look across at the more complex ones and the harder ones to solve.
Okay, so Abby's got the rule of 2/3, 1/3. So 2/3 of the resources on improving all water, with the remaining 1/3 on the best and worst. But within the resources spent on the best worst, I spend 2/3 on the worst and 1/3 maintaining the best. A lot of 2/3, 1/3, but
yeah,
we got the sense of like, priorities on. Okay, then Lizzie agree with Umer about the worst rivers should be a priority, because the more water sources that are somewhat okay and or doing well means more people will appreciate them and will benefit the environment more. I also think monitoring as many, if not all, water sources is key to maintaining the environment and making sure that there is none that are in decline of biodiversity.
Yeah, so in terms of monitoring, we do have a network of monitoring. It is shifting on how we do monitoring. We do have surveillance networks sort of across all rivers. We cannot monitor every single river, but this gives us an idea of what's going across the network. And we also do specific monitoring in areas where there are particular pressures. So where we know and there hasn't been change in the river for quite a while, we will reduce some of our monitoring and put it in places where we can see change, which could be climate change, could be population growth, or could be a particular pollution pressure to give us better understanding. We're also, there's quite a few citizen science type of initiatives, Riverfly and various others, which are starting to give us some great information locally on what's going on, and some local groups finding out to do that sort of more regular monitoring, which we're, yeah, our funding wouldn't allow us to do quite that much. So it's good to use both types of monitoring.
Okay, so we need to go back to the third question, but please share more points if you've got more ideas in the chat as for the previous one. Okay.
Great. So I'm afraid, oh, try my mute. Doesn't seem to. We'll just wait. Is that any better? Is that any better?
Yes, I can hear you.
Okay, sometimes when it self, Roberta. Jenny, could you say flicks it off and it's okay.
So I missed that, Tony. There's a bit of reverb again.
Yeah, I think that, is that any better?
Perfect.
Yeah, that seems to do the job. Okay, so another tricky question, I'm afraid, but so we've looked at whether we want to restore our rivers, where we want to prioritise our funding or our effort, but also as a third question, wanted to ask you what can or what do you think individuals should be doing to restore or protect their river, wetlands or beaches, versus what you consider larger organisations like the Environment Agency or like the Wildlife Trusts should be doing as part of that. So the types of things on this slide, there's some ideas, and there's a cutout here again from this interactive slide, which does give you some ideas of what can be done. So should we be reducing the amount of water we use, or can we influence others to make better? What other personal choices could we make which will have an impact? And I've also put a question here, I think Jenny's adding them to the chat, which is good. We heard last time a bit more about a Birmingham action campaign. That would be nice to hear about, particularly within the consultation response.
Perfect. So we are on the third question. Let's give some time to type and to think. Lumer, you've got your hand is raised, but maybe it's from the last time, I don't know. Or do you want to speak again? It was from last time, okay.
Less cups of tea to reduce our water consumption.
I think water is important for us to drink. I think that's one area that we definitely need to be careful. Telling the British that to reduce tea might be slightly emotive. I hear what you're saying, but I think there's some areas we need drinking water. That's a fundamental sort of right, and we need to make sure that we've got enough water for people to drink. So, yeah. I'm a bit scared by that.
It would be a difficult campaign to run.
Tricky. But I mean, it is, I think we were mentioning at this time, it is interesting the use of water during COVID. There have been huge spikes in certain parts of the country with quite massive water usage. And other countries, places in Denmark, per capita, so per person, uses about half as much water as we do in this country. And if you go back a number of decades, we also used to, each person used to use less water. So there are questions about the fact we are using more water. And sometimes that isn't to do with the climate and the environment. In hotter times, we often have an increase of personal usage of water.
Yeah. So Abby is saying that a lot of the population need educating to help understand their part in protecting rivers and the natural environment. So the importance of educating the general public about these.
Yeah, I think there's quite a few things that people, you know, you can turn on a tap. It's not a lot of effort to get the water, so it's not real, the impact on the river. You can't see the rivers going dry from that type of impact. I mean, there's lots of people don't realise you shouldn't necessarily put wet wipes down the toilet. There's quite, in terms of plastics, I think people are getting that, and that sort of campaign has really helped people understand the impact of a throwaway society and how that can actually sort of go all the way down the chain into our seas and impact there. I think there's a lot of increase in understanding. But yes, I agree.
So Lizzie, I feel like within the general public there isn't enough acknowledgement about how to protect our water or save our water. So I agree with Abby. And then Humor, having systems in place for water usage in homes like water meters and measuring devices, and for business as well, and educating the public and including government and other business and organizations. Yeah.
At the Environment Agency, we yourself have tools that we use our own water usage and our own fuel usage and our own energy usage to make sure that we're acting the act as well as what we're saying and reducing that year on year. And that ties in with things like our carbon targets and those sorts of things. But yeah, you're right, government has a part as much as everybody else to reduce its own usage within the works that it does. But yeah, the other point you're saying about water meters, it's not every house has to have a water meter. It depends which company you have. So some companies, water industry makes it obligatory for everyone to have water meters, and others it's just voluntary. So things like that might help reduce people's usage.
So a point from Abby, an additional point is that big companies and factories need to be held very accountable financially for over abstracting and pollution. Yeah.
So where they don't take within their permits and that type of thing, or they actually pollute the river. I've worked on horrific ones where bleach has been let straight out into the river, and then picking out the fish that have been impacting that, and they are taken to court, and there are better fines than there used to be historically. So the permits from that has changed on the impact. But some of the business would say we're bottling water for people, or we are producing food. There's a number of uses that industry will need, and sort of balancing how much they're allowed to take out with how much is there. They may well be acting legally, but it's still having an impact on the water environment. So that's where it can get tricky.
All good points.
No, this is exactly the type of discussion that is important. I think someone was saying earlier to have locally and decide what balance people want and what people want for the future of the environment. And I don't think people have always been involved in some of those discussions and decisions. So I think,
yeah. Perfect. So we we have got 1 minute left to go to the other session. So I think that then any final points, if not, like they will stay in the chat and we will collate them for really the final one. In regards to what individuals could do, I think communal litter pickers could be an idea, and more school events about protecting water and what they could do when they are at home. And then there is a LinkedIn. Thank you for the consultation to send the info for contact info. We can connect and see you soon. Thank you, Umar. Yeah, but there is another small session, if you have time, Umar, which is the next one. It's on the infographics. So I'm sharing my presentation with you. Okay.
What I will do, Jenny, it seems to take off the thing for some reason.
Okay, I'll just double check that everyone can hear me okay. Brilliant. Okay. Thank you, Roberta. So hi, everyone. Prior to the webinar today, Roberta and Isla would have shared the interactive Rethinking Water interactive infographic that we've got on the water cycle with you. So we've reflected on the infographic as we've been going through the session today. And before we wrap up, we would really like to know if you have any feedback on the infographic itself. So before I go through some things you might want to consider, please use the chat function, or after I finish speaking, please raise your hand and you can speak over the call as well. But some things you might want to think about were, did the infographic help with your understanding of the water cycle? Did you learn anything new from the tool that you didn't know already? Were the interactive infographics, were they interesting and engaging? Could you navigate your way through the tool okay? Or did you have some difficulty? And within the tool and within the questions that we've covered today, have we covered the right topics? Are there any topics that you feel should have been picked up and perhaps weren't? And what are these? And finally, did you find were the interactive infographics, did they provide the right balance between the technical and the narrative side of things? So through sort of against the sort of storytelling as we went through the various years, past, future and present, what the problems were, what we can control and how it affects us. So I'll be really interested on hearing your thoughts on that. So please use the chat function or raise your hand now to speak. Thank you. So I think we've had a comment through from Umar, so it was very good. And if I was the Environment Agency, I would use this in our day-to-day business, and it was very helpful and useful. Learned quite a bit and covered the general areas, provided a balance, and yeah, see you soon. Well, thank you, Umar. That's some very positive feedback, and I'm glad you enjoyed the session today and the infographic tool was useful to you.
Good. Okay, so Tony added, were the interactive infographics interesting, engaging? Could you navigate your way through the tool okay? Have we focused on the right topic? So the interactive presentation looked really good, but was a bit fiddly to navigate through, to read all of the points.
Yeah, that's really useful to understand, Abby. I think there's a lot of information which we needed to convey within the infographic. So that's possibly something we can look at improving the interactivity and how the information flows throughout.
Right balance between the technical and the narrative side of things. yeah, do the interactive infographics provide the right balance, and then if we focus on the right topics, are there any topics that should be picked up in the interactive infographics which currently are not there? What are these themes? So Liz is saying that I like how it was broken up into questions because it made it easier to read through and understand with all the information.
Yeah, thanks, Lizzie. There's a lot of information, so yeah, hopefully the tool provided it, yeah, made it quite easily digestible to maybe come back to the information at different points of time and to be able to, yeah, understand it as you were going through.
Yeah. And do you think there was anything missing, like any areas that should have been covered, that you would add to it? So, you can see that someone is typing, so I will, let's wait a little bit. So maybe for younger children, it could be simplified for education purposes. Youngsters are the future, and so learning can never start early enough. So having a simplified version with less content, more simpler content for children. Lizzie, I agree. Yeah,
that's a really good point, Abby. It's important that we tailor our information to our audience to ensure that they're engaging with us and then they can engage with us as well. So it's a good point. Thank you.
Perfect. Okay. Yeah. So a couple more minutes on these, and then we will move to the wrapping up with the next steps. Yeah, so something that we did focus on, if you've got any ideas on areas that were not covered in the infographics that you thought that should be covered, if any, because there was a lot of content, so yeah. Maybe it could be provided in different languages too, for people who don't have English as their first language.
That's another, yeah, very good point, Abby. We need to make sure it's inclusive as possible. Again, important on that engagement front.
Good. Yeah, more broadly, the accessibility, no? So yeah, looking at other age groups and how they will read it, and other languages to make it accessible for more audiences. Good. Okay. So I think that we've done with this session, but if you've got any more points for any part of the webinar today, please write down your final thoughts. So what will happen next? With Environment Agency, we have run 2 webinars so far. Now we are planning to organize a big event. So an event where young people could have the opportunity to have their voices heard in inputting into the structure of the Environment Agency. As Tony said earlier on, the Environment Agency wants to move to be more closer to the young people, to better engage and hear the voice of young people. So now, in the next event, we will look exactly at these, focus on recommendations for the Environment Agency and for the board of the Environment Agency to improve the engagement with young people, to hear better their voices. But what will happen is that this event will not be organized by ourselves on our own. We want to co-organize this event with young people so that we make the most of it. And so we are going to create a working group with young people involved. So what we will do after the webinar is like we will share this opportunity with all the young people who join the first and the second webinar. And then we will create the working group and work on the design, the co-design of the event. So if you're interested, then like you will hear from us, and please stay in touch and and be involved. And another thing I wanted to share is that there is an opportunity with our Bright Future. We have got like an apprentice opportunity. So talking about employability earlier on and ways to get into your first job, your first working opportunity. This is like a kind of a soft way into the environmental sector with our team, our lovely team. So I hope that you enjoyed the webinar like I did. And so when then we will share the resources, information, if we will ask for your feedback, but if you've got any more questions, please get in contact and we will be happy to help. Have a lovely evening and thank you for joining us today.
Thank you.
Bye everyone. Thank you.
Thanks everyone.